All right. Like I said, I hope it's at least as good as the previous microphone. But it looks nicer. See, it's like all fancy looking, so it looks better. Okay, let's get started. We are in the middle of chapter 32. And as we discussed, chapter 32 has got a unique status in the world of Tanya. And in earliest manuscripts, it's not even present, which seems to suggest that the Alter Rebbe only later added it, like sort of parachuted it in. And as we mentioned, that the number or the word Lamed Beis, Lev, which is 32, is also a word, Lev, which means the heart, which is, again, where the battle is primarily. And the theme is about Avos Yisrael, from whence we have mentioned and derived that the theme of Tanya, of course, is the discussion of our relationship with Hashem. And there is a lateral capacity for us to go from our relationship with Hashem to our relationships with other people. So it's not only our sort of modern sensitivity that we want to utilize the lessons of Hasidus for how we can get along with one another. It's embedded right there in Tanya that through this process, we not only enrich, hopefully, our relationship with Hashem, we enrich our relationship with other people. The last piece that we actually started last time, but I think we could get going again just for a little bit, is the story with Hillel. And we raised a few of the questions, just very quickly to recap. A man described as a heathen, that is a Gentile, came first to Shammai, and he said to him, teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one foot. And again, numerous interpretations as to what precisely that metaphor is, but in our context, meaning I don't have a lot of patience, just give me one single principle on one leg. And there's other interpretations, that when we daven the Amidah, we stand with our feet together, because angels are described as having one leg, and therefore he wants to be angelic. But in our context, it's like, teach me the whole Torah and be quick about it. And Shammai rebukes him with the builder's cubit, and he goes to Hillel, who says, that which is displeasurable to you, don't do to others. The rest is commentary. Now go and learn. And again, sometimes that part gets left out. It's not just this is all you have to do, but this is the beginning. And this led us to the question, what does it mean that this is in fact the beginning and the essence of the entirety? What does it have to do with the mitzvahs between man and Hashem? So I understand that since I don't want to be stolen from, so I'm not allowed to steal. And I don't want to be lied to, so I'm not allowed to lie. And I don't want people to infringe on my property, so I don't infringe on other people's property. But what does this have to do with mezuzahs and matzah and sukkahs and all the mitzvahs between man and God? But as we mentioned already, we see that really the two are intertwined. My relationship with Hashem is a lesson and a model from our relationship with others, and my relationship with others is a relationship with Hashem. But here the Alter Rebbe says, it gets to the core of it, which is, what does it mean to love another person like myself? Again, it doesn't just say to love them, it says to love them like myself. Now, in contrast, for example, we say in the davening, you'll recognize, v'ahavta es Hashem alekecha, you should love the Lord your God. So there is a concept of loving, but not loving like myself. We are told to love the stranger, but we're not told to love him like myself. We're just told to love them. So there is a difference between love and loving like myself. And so the Alter Rebbe's basic point that he derives is that it is really one and the same. The mission of our relationship with Hashem is to give primacy to our neshama over our humanity. And again, we're not talking about our skeleton, but our impulses. So if I'm born to be a person who's naturally lazy, that's my humanity. My objective is to override that with the commitment to the spiritual, and the soul overrides the body. Ultimately, like everything, it always comes down to Mesiras Nefesh. And again, not just in the dramatic sense of the great heroes who literally went to their death rather than to bow down to idols. The core concept of Mesiras Nefesh, which we translate as sacrifice of self, but literally means the deliverance of my identity, is that I make my neshama the primary, and my humanity is a mechanism to enable my soul to execute its purpose. So when I make my soul the primary, then my service of Hashem is aligned. And when I make my soul the primary, my love for another person is like myself, because all that separates us is our physical humanity. our neshama is in fact identical, as we will elaborate on. So I'm going to back up here just a couple of lines that we did already to get a little bit of a running start, which is the introduction of the Hillel story. So in the Chitas, it's the 25th of Adar 1. And it's about halfway down the chapter. I don't know how else to describe it. If you have the original Hebrew print, it's and this is what Hillel said, something like that in the English. V'zeh she'amar Hillel hazakeh. This is the Hillel the elder. There were two men named Hillel. That's why we call him Hillel the elder. Okay. V'zeh she'amar Hillel hazakeh. This is what Hillel the elder said. Al kiyum mitzvah regarding this mitzvah. Zeh kol haTorah kula v'idich perushu. That it is the entirety of all of Torah, and the rest is commentary. And he did instruct the person, now go and learn it. He didn't just say, okay, that's all. He did say, now go and learn it. Concurrently, we ask the question why Hillel phrases it in the negative. Why does Hillel say that which is unfavorable to you, that which you don't like, that which you hate, do not do to your neighbor? Why doesn't he phrase it in the positive, that which you, to love your neighbors yourself? And we explain that we're going to start off with not doing to my neighbor what I don't like. And it's not about what I don't like, that if I don't like chocolate, I don't give my neighbor chocolate. But the idea is what I don't like is to be disregarded and my entity and my very existence. That's what I don't like, not to be taken seriously, so to speak. Okay, so let's keep going. So here the Alter Rebbe says, the whole foundation, and again, we talked about this last time, this is a very bold statement. The whole premise, the entirety of all of Torah, what is Torah's mission? Is, the Alter Rebbe writes here, and it's a pretty bold statement, to promote our soul over our body. What is asked of me? Well-known story of a person who came to the Alter Rebbe. He had been wealthy. He lost his wealth, and he was very concerned, not just for not being able to make payments on his own personal things, but the tzedakahs that relied on him. And the Alter Rebbe said, you're too concerned with what you need and not concerned enough with what you are needed for. Now, that's the lesson for us. Our mission is to make the world a godly place. Our task is to promote our neshama over our body. Our mission is not what's in it for me, but what can I do in the service of Hashem? How can I promote or further Hashem's plan? This is what I want, but is this what is wanted from me? This is the essence of all of Torah. Now, again, the boldness of that statement is pretty startling that the Alter Rebbe should lay it out. And he lays it out curiously in a discussion about other people with people, not people with Hashem. This isn't the part of Tanya about my struggling with my davening or my struggling with my Torah study concentration. This is the part of Tanya about my struggling with the guy next to me who I don't always find to be so easy to love, like we talked about. All the Jews I never met, I love. Some of the Jews I have met that I'm still working on it. So here the Alter Rebbe says, this is what in fact brings to true love of another. True love of another is not born of their virtues, because not everybody has a virtue. And the guy may be very difficult to love. And not just because he's misunderstood, because he's a rotten guy. But what I love about them is not them, but their neshama. And their neshama and my neshama are one and the same. I may be annoyed at my right hand for not being as nimble as I'd like it to be. And therefore I can't play the piano, or my legs don't run as fast. And hopefully not, but if anybody's ever felt that nuisance, oh, why is it so hard for my knees, and why am my elbows and so on? But I wouldn't ever think, okay, well, therefore it's not my elbow. Therefore I have to get rid of this elbow. I mean, it's a little bit of the perversion of our society that I think I can just, chop myself up like Mr. Potato Head and reinstate it with something else. But it's mine. I'm not doing it it's my elbow. And that's what we mean by love. Not that it's my favorite thing, that it's my favorite pleasure, but it is absolutely mine and indistinguishable and inseparable from mine. So here we go. The Chol Almin, to raise it all the way, Ikra V'Sharsh to the Chol Almin, all the way to its origin. V'Gam Lahamshich, and at the same time, to go up and down. Moshe brings the Torah to us, Aaron brings us to Hashem. Lahamshich Orin Seif Baruch Hu B'Knesset Yisrael, to bring down godliness into the community of the Jewish people. Kamesha Kosav Lakama, like we will explain. The Hainu B'Makar Neshamas call Yisrael, Mehevi Echad B'Echad Dafka. And when are we able to do this? when we come together as one. Now, we all know this. Everybody should get along, but this isn't just some advocacy for kumbaya. We're not against it. And it's not just that we like unity and therefore Hashem must like it too, because we don't suppose that Hashem likes peanut butter and jelly because I like it. What we mean by this is the essence of Hashem is oneness. And again, as we've said so many times, not just one, like there's one book on the table, but true oneness. And therefore, in order to evoke God's blessing, we have to emulate godliness. The more godliness we make, we present, the more godliness is drawn to us. So in our natural human state, I'm me and you're you. There's separation. There is bifurcation. Our entire existence is predicated on yesterday, today, tomorrow. When we can overcome that and we can see unification, that's why it brings godliness. Not just because we like it when everybody gets along. That's true. But for that, you don't need Tanya. For that, we understand that even at a social level. What's going on spiritually is when we tap into that godly characteristic of unity, of non-separateness, then we evoke the essence of Hashem, every aspect of Hashem, the godliness of it. So that when we are one, we can be one with Hashem's oneness. Not when there is separation amongst neshamas, because God does not dwell in a split place. Now, why doesn't God dwell there? We know why we don't like it. We don't like it when people don't get along. We don't like it when there's friction and tension. But that's our human character. And every society promotes at some level this idea that unity comes along. I mean, even the dictator says, we all have to be the same. And then we talk about diversity within unity. That's what we understand, and I'm not mocking it, at a human level, at a humanly appreciable level. But why do we presuppose that God likes that? Because we like it. And our explanation is not only based on scriptural support, because it is commensurate with the character of Hashem. Hashem's character is unity, is oneness. Not even unity, singularity. That's the meaning of the Hashem Echad. So when we are Echad, then Hashem is more present because it is the natural alliance, the natural habitat of the infinity of Hashem. Like we say, Barchenu Avinu, bless us Hashem, our Father, Kulana ki echad, we are one. We are all together as one in the light of your face. Now, why do we say Barchenu Avinu, bless us our Father? Why do we use that? Because we're trying to evoke this characteristic. Not only like I am with my sibling, because we both come from the same father, even there's a further underscoring of this level, which we discussed way back in the very beginning of Tanya, that just like the entirety of my humanity is the product of my parents, that is even the most sophisticated aspect of a human being, the brain, and the least sophisticated, the fingernails, all come from that same origin. So Yaakov and Esav come from the same act of conception, and yet they are completely oppositional to one to another, but they have one father. So the reference to Hashem here as father is not just fatherly in the sense of the protective provider, but it is the father in the sense that it is absolute singularity, like the process of gestation that transforms an absolute origin into such diversity, as diverse as the fingernails in the brain, and yet they all stem from that same original contribution from the father. So the father reference here is not just fatherly, again, as in the sense of protector and provider, but in that original origin. There is a sort of non-literal reading where we can read this verse as Barchenu Avinu, bless us our Father, Kulanu, all of us, Ke'echad, not as one, but because we are one. So it's a non-literal reading of it, meaning Hashem should bless us because we are one. And that's the rule. Hashem likes nothing more than peace. Hashem doesn't reside in a place that is damaged. Again, we know why we don't like it. Why do we suppose Hashem doesn't like it? And this is what we have explained. Because Hashem's character, so to speak, basic definition is singularity. And therefore, Hashem's singularity is evoked when we present the singularity. I mean, that's the idea of having a guest. A guest feels welcome when you provide them with the things that they are comfortable with. So if you know the guest is allergic to potatoes and you serve potatoes, they don't feel welcome. So what is Hashem's essential character is singularity. When we present ourselves in the manner of singularity, we evoke a further presence of Hashem. So now the Alter Rebbe anticipates, and this is a classic style that we have in Talmudic study. You present a thesis, then you present an antithesis, and then you come up with a synthesis. So you present an idea, it seems perfectly harmless. You go, wait, hold on. Here's a seemingly perpendicular, direct contradiction to all that you just said. So this is all nice and dandy, but it seems to be in direct violation of a core teaching that we have. This that it says in the Gemara, that if a person sees his friend sinning, it is a mitzvah to hate him. She said, and go tell on the teacher. Go be a tattletale. That is a mitzvah. Now, we, of course, hold this in great contempt, but what would we rather do? If we know about a crime, don't we tell our people, if you see a crime, go and tell the teacher? Oh, you're a tattletale. So, okay. Again, we may or may not like it. The question is, or the statement is that we're supposed to hate the person. I mean, if we see someone, let's imagine it this way. If I see someone, God forbid, 1,000 times, committing a murder, what am I supposed to say? Who am I to get involved? None of my business. He's really a good person. He's just committing a murder. And I'm not going to tell the policeman because I don't want to be a tattletale. I mean, certainly not. I mean, we would never. So why is it that if I see a person doing an avera between man and Hashem, that all of a sudden I became so tolerant? Why am I so tolerant of him offending Hashem when I'm not tolerant of him offending other people? Certainly if he offends me. So I used to tell the kids in shul when they were smashing up the ice with the ice chopper, I said, now be very careful, because the second worst thing is you could hit your foot. They said, Rabbi Epstein, what's the worst thing? You can hit my foot. What do you mean what the worst thing is? So why is it that if I see somebody, God forbid, again, about to commit a murder, I'm going to go and stop them and intervene, and I'm going to prosecute him, and I'm going to hold him in disdain. But if I see him speaking Lashon Hara or doing some avera, suddenly I became all tolerant. Why? Don't I love Hashem? If he hurts another person, I'm angry with him. Why, if he hurts Hashem, am I not angry with him? So what are we, so to speak, supposed to do with this, which seems to blow our whole theory out of the water? So the Alter Rebbe explains. Now, there's a story that there are certain people whose crimes are so horrific that the Gemara says one may not have pity on him. He's so evil, one should not pity him. So the Rebbe Rashab used to say, wow, how pitiful is it on somebody who is so bad? Torah says you can't pity him. We should have such pity on him because he's so bad that Torah says you can't pity him. So, you can't get these Lubavitchers now. It's better that way. We love you anyway. Rabbi Shimon will drive 4 hours in a snowstorm to see some bank robber and so on. But why? Why don't we hate them? Why don't we carry this hatred for them? And again, we have a statement in the Talmud. So we can't just say, oh, well, we love them anyway. I mean, why? So the Alter Rebbe explains, first of all, what are the circumstances that make me eligible to hate the person? Hainu, first of all, b'chaveru b'teiru mitzvahs. It says, one who sees, if you go back to the exact quote, sees chaveroi. Now, the word chaveroi, the root word there is chaver. So you look it up in the standard Hebrew English dictionary, it says friend. It's not actually a perfectly accurate translation. The root of it is the word chaver, one who you are joined with. If two people are in a dispute, they're also referred to as chaver because they're joined together. They have been joined together by the circumstance. So when it says in the Gemara that I have to hate him, And the Gemara's context there is, even if it's not prosecutable, I didn't have two witnesses and didn't have all the different requirements that lead the person to being imprisoned, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why there's a value to hating him, because he's otherwise free to go, because we don't have enough evidence and so forth to put him to death or incarcerate, whatever it may be. And that's why there's a value in us hating him, because he's walking the streets. So first of all, the Alter Rebbe says that it's talking about that I have bonded with him. What kind of connection have I made with him? There was a rabbi, he just recently passed away. His name is Rabbi Fegelstock. He was the principal in the Chabad school in Montreal for a million years. And he passed away last month, an older man. Anyway, in the different eulogies, there was a teacher there who said a story. He said, once upon a time, there was a student whose behavior was very bad, and they were having a staff meeting, and they wanted to expel the student because they deserved to be expelled. That was the truth. So the rabbi, the principal, said to the people who were advocating for this, and they weren't being mean-spirited about it, this was in fact, he says, before you tell me that, all the different reasons, I first want you to tell me how many chapters of Tehillim have you said for this child? And they said, well, says, okay. Once you've said, enough chapters of Tehillim for this child, then you can come and tell me why he should be expelled. Now, it may, in fact, I don't know the specific, that he deserved to be expelled. And maybe that was the right thing to do for him and for everyone else. But if you haven't first said a few chapters of Tehillim and prayed for this child who's in such a distressed circumstance, then you're not yet in a position to expel him. Again, it may be the best thing. Murderers should be executed and criminals should go to jail. But it doesn't mean that we also don't say Tehillim for this person. So have you made him a chaver? Have you aligned yourself with him through Torah and mitzvahs? Now, that also means, is he aware of his Torah and mitzvahs? Now, we know this. There is the concept that's in halacha that a person who is what is referred to by the phrase tinoik shenishba, which translates as an infant, a tinoik really is like a suckling, like lamamash, an infant, who has been captured. And he's been captured and raised in a circumstance where he has no idea what you're talking about. He's not rebelling against Torah. He never heard of it. He never heard of kosher. He never heard of matzah. He never heard of tefillin. It's completely foreign to him. So we have total compassion. This is a concept that it's codified in halacha, in contrast to the person who's the out-and-out rebel. Now then I say we, I mean in the Chabad world, under the Rebbe's guidance, have totally expanded this. Because, of course, even if the guy went to yeshiva and he knows how to read and he knows how to daven, and we say, well, he's really a tinoik shenish. But what do you mean? He went, but he didn't come to my class. He doesn't really know. So we have extended this, ad extremis, to say that he doesn't really even know what he's doing. And this is this idea that the chaver means that I have made an attempt. I have felt the responsibility, like that story. I've said Tehillim for this child, and I may have to kick him out of the school. That may be the best thing, but I have said Tehillim for this child. In fact, there's another story I just reminded myself of. There was once a bacher in Lubavitch, and he did something naughty. I don't know what it was. So the previous Rebbe was the principal. This was in the times of the fifth Rebbe. And he gave him a punishment. This punishment was he wasn't allowed to have any of the benefits of the yeshiva, which basically meant he couldn't eat in the dining room for whatever it was. He had to go somewhere else. He was like, he only could come, whatever it was. So it came lunchtime. He knew he wasn't allowed. So he figured, go out for a walk, we'll figure it out. So he's walking around, he's outside. It's a nice day. And all of a sudden, like these 2 or 3 boys come running to him. What are you doing out here? The Rebbe, referring to the previous Rebbe, is looking for you. He says, looking for me. What does he want from me? So he comes, he says, what? You told me I'm not allowed to go to the dining room. He says, right. So you have to come to my house for lunch. I mean, you have to eat. So you have to come to my house for lunch. Or where are you going to eat lunch? Right. So you got to be kicked out. That's your punishment, but you still have to eat. You still have to have lunch. So I'm looking all over for you to come to my house for lunch. Okay. It's this idea. So first of all, I have to make sure he's a chaver. I have to make sure that I have made a connection with him. That's what I meant to say before. The word chaver literally means bonded, like a chibor is to connect. A machberet is a booklet because the pages are connected. And there is a mitzvah in Torah to rebuke. And as we know, the mitzvah in the Torah of rebuking comes in conjunction with the mitzvah of loving your neighbor as yourself. And curiously, we just had it in the parsha yesterday. Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, gives Moshe advice as to how best to set up the court system. Now, all in-law jokes aside, doesn't everybody love to get advice from their father-in-law who just showed up yesterday, on the potato truck from Idaho? And Moshe could be like, I'm Moshe, like maybe you heard of me. I spoke with Paro, I spoke with God, I split the sea, I got 5 books, and you showed up now, and you're going to tell me what to do. And we all know, anybody who's ever been advised, that doesn't mean it's bad, but it's hard. It's very hard to accept advice, and it's difficult to give advice. We look closely in the parsha that we read yesterday. Yisro is referred to every time, like it's really like odd. The father-in-law of Moses, We know who he is. We know who he is. Why? So one of the interpretations is that this is the recommendation for helping to allow or to smooth the advice giving, that it might in fact be successful. And it's a difficult thing, and all in-law jokes aside. But what the Torah is saying is you first have to establish a rapport with the person. Yes, it's true, as the Gemara says, accept the truth from whomever says it. And yet it's just a fact that I am more likely to be receptive to advice that comes from somebody with whom I have already established a rapport than a total stranger walks up to me in the street and tells me the advice. Even it could be the truth. It could be excellent advice. And by Torah constantly emphasizing that he is the father-in-law of Moses. And again, we're not making in-law jokes here. The idea is that they have already established he only has your best interest at heart. So the Alter Rebbe says, before you get to hate the guy, which there could be I know it sounds odd, but there's a certain Yahoo, I get to hate the guy. I get to catch him doing something bad. I get to feel justified and so on, which is a certain Yetzer Hara. Maybe it's more men than women. It's this competitive thing. I'm good. You're bad. I found something you did wrong. Ha, ha, ha. I'm telling the teacher on you. So first of all, like we said, have you said Tillim? Have you invited him to your house for lunch? Have you shed a tear? Have you fulfilled properly the mitzvah of rebuking your friend? And again, if I rebuke him from a position of gotcha, then I haven't rebuked him in the manner of Torah. If I rebuke him in the presentation of friendship and love, sincerely for their benefit, then there's some possibility that he will accept it. We have the prohibition that one may not put a stumbling block before the blind. So Torah is not just telling us not to be cruel to blind people. It's telling us not to give somebody bad advice. So much so that even if the advice is in fact good for the person, but it benefits the advisor should not give that advice. Because again, even if he genuinely believes that this is to the benefit of the advisee, because there is at least the appearance and the possibility. There are some, this is not a halacha, it's not required, but just as an example, there are some soifrim who have a policy that if you bring them mezuzahs to check, and they check it and they find it to be invalid, they will not sell you a replacement mezuzah, because they don't want there to be any sense that they are trying to sort of kind of maybe, and again, that doesn't mean that he's nefarious, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not a halakha, it's not a requirement, just try to illustrate the point that when we give rebuke, it's a very delicate and sensitive thing. And therefore, before I get to rub my hands together in glee and feel superior that I get to hate this guy, I have to make these cheshbonos, these accountings in my own head. Have I established a connection with this person, like the Tillim? Have I genuinely rebuked him? And that word sounds so harsh, but have I genuinely attempted to correct him in the manner that is appropriate? Not just told you kind of thing and gotcha kind of thing. And then nevertheless, and as there is a statement, I think it's originally from the Ramban, I'm not sure, it says, words that come from the heart enter the heart. So if the words didn't enter the heart, maybe they didn't come from my heart. So when I say I told him and he doesn't listen, well, maybe it was the way I told him. Now, maybe not. I mean, again, we're not blaming the rebuker and saying, well, if only you would show him kindness, then he wouldn't. And then it's my fault. But before again, we're not talking about action here. He may be in prison, but we're talking about the emotional sense that I should hate him, not that I should turn him into the police. That's not an emotional behavior. That's a rational behavior. The emotion is only after I've gone through this whole checklist. But if I have not chavered him, I have not aligned myself with him, I haven't gone through this process, the eno makudav etzlai, and I haven't brought him close. I haven't brought that together. Hine al zelmer Hillel azakein. So here the same Hillel says, "Hevi mitalmid of shal Aaron, be like the students of Aaron. Oyev shalom, love peace. Oyev esabrias, and love people who have nothing to be loved about them other than one thing, their creations." It's an unusual phrase. It doesn't say love people. It doesn't say love Jews. It says love brios, which translates as created things. Why am I loving him? Because he's created. Why does that make him worthy of love? And again, love doesn't mean it's my favorite thing to do. Why does that mean that I have anything to do with him? Because Hashem created him. And if Hashem created him, that means that he is somehow an integral part of this process. Absent that, Hashem wouldn't have created him. We presume that Hashem is not wasteful and he doesn't create something that he doesn't need. So the existence of this entity is innately evidence that he is significant, indispensable even. And that's why Hashem, and that's why he exists. And then, umekarven l'Torah, I have to bring him to Torah. Now, the same Hillel, again, you recognize it's the same Hillel, this quote is from Pirkei Avos, is telling us to be like Aaron. Now, there's a curiosity. Moshe is Aaron's sort of partner, and really Moshe is the leader. And yet, Moshe doesn't teach us this lesson, because that's not the Moshe quality. And we are all to aspire to have both qualities. Moshe's quality is this is good, this is bad, right, wrong, acceptable, unacceptable. So this synthesis of no tolerance for the misbehavior and absolute acceptance of the misbehavior, but not the action, is the Moshe quality is no, that is wrong. You may not do that. There is no tolerance for that behavior. And the Aaron quality is there is absolute acceptance of the person, not the behavior. And again, in theory, it's separatable. In practice, it's hard. It's a hard thing to separate out between the behavior and the behaviorer, the person doing it. Now, we are still left with the question that, okay, in practice, it's not likely that I'm ever going to get to hate somebody. I'm probably not going to get to that level. But it's still at least a theory. And as we know, it's very much a message in Tanya that the aspiration informs on the behavior. So I'm never going to be a tzaddik, but I aspire to tzaddik, and so it informs on my behavior. So the question now is lingering on the flip side. Why is there ever an ideal? Even if I never in fact do it, is not the relevant point. Why is there ever an ideal to get to a point where I should hate somebody? What's the value? Is it just to kick him out? Because then it doesn't matter whether I rebuked him or I didn't rebuke him. If it's so that I should avoid the person because their behavior is so toxic, well, then that's true whether I rebuked him or I didn't rebuke him. For my own protection, I mean, again, why is there ever a circumstance? Whether or not it will happen in practice is not the relevant point. The statement of the Gemara that when I see someone violating a sin, it's a mitzvah for me to hate him and to tell my teacher to hate him. Why is that ever something that we should aspire to? That would seem to be something we should always avoid. Oh, so here we go. Loimer means to tell. Even somebody who is distant from Torah of Hashem, and it's a curious point, Torah's Hashem, I mean, what other Torah is there? However, Perhaps the Alter Rebbe here is suggesting that there is a person can be very close to Torah. That is, they can be scholars. They can be very fluent in the texts of Torah, but they have somehow dislodged it from their relationship with Hashem. And his service. And again, his service is not only about being compliant, but being transformative. But remember, service meaning going beyond just my natural proclivities and my habits and things that I'm comfortable with. And therefore, he is called, as we mentioned there as well, that there is nothing, what's the word I'm looking for? There is nothing virtuous to say about him other than, well, Hashem created him. That's the only thing I can say about him that's of any stature. Nothing else about him is worthy of note. Shammai is also a good guy, but the Alter Rebbe is saying we're going to follow Hillel, Moshe Rabbeinu also. And again, not to ever depict them as harsh, but there is a certain point. So, no, this behavior is unacceptable. You may not do it. Don't do it. Bad. And, we have a pushback to that. So what about this guy? We should draw him close with the thick cords of love. And again, even if I am unrequited love, it doesn't, it's not just this idea, well, if you love him enough, then, because sometimes that feels like blaming, if all the student needs is someone to love them, so that they failed because no one loved them, so it's my fault, it's the teacher's fault, because they may be a rotten guy. But again, we still have the mitzvah to have love. And again, love doesn't mean it's my favorite person, and love doesn't mean that I enjoy it. It means that I cannot sever my responsibility from this person. Even if I have to kick him out, I still have to say Tillim and cry for his the sad situation that he's in. And maybe, but it's not about the outcome. Maybe I will succeed in bringing him closer to the service of Hashem. Maybe. But and even if I don't, and even if he turns out to be a rotten kid, I still have at least achieved the value of expressing my love for him. I've had Avos Yisrael, even if it doesn't change him. So yes, if this was like a Disney after-school special, you just have to show him some kindness and love, and then he would turn around to be dramatic music, and the bully becomes a friend. That's hope. Amen. Should only be. But it doesn't commonly happen. That's not a common life experience. And that doesn't mean that I have failed because this guy still turns out to be rotten. Now, what then is there any value in this hatred of him? And here's what the Alter Rebbe says, that if I do that, and I have the chaver with him, and I cry, and I say Tillim, and I am patient and tolerant, and he's still a rotten kid, and he's still evil, he's still criminal, he still deserves to go to jail, and I do, and I should hate him, I still can love him at the same time. I can have hatred and love, and the two can coexist. That doesn't make any sense, right? When we become more aligned with Hashem, one of the characteristics of Hashem is noisei hafachim. He tolerates opposites. In human beings, we are bifurcated. It's either today or tomorrow. It's up or down, in or out. But that's not how Hashem operates. Hashem is not limited to this sort of Newtonian physics, Euclidean geometry kind of slotting. That's a human limitation. And that human limitation is overcome when we become appropriately and properly focused on both hating and loving. Now, there is a story in the Gemara. It's a very odd story, which the Rebbe explains. And I actually saw this happen in action. There was a certain Mishnah author, high-level tzaddik kind of guy, and he once came across this person. And he said to this person, a stranger who he just met, he said, "You are the ugliest creature I have ever seen." And the man said back, go to the craftsman who crafted me. And then the Tanya chased after him and he apologized and so on. So it's a very odd story, obviously. So the Rebbe explains that sometimes a person is so ugly, and again, it's not a reference to their physical appearance, but to their spiritual appearance, that the only way to get them to do something about it is to call it out as it is. And look what happened. The ugly person, who again was spiritually ugly, said, go to the craftsman who crafted me, meaning he thought about Hashem. Now, I could just share with you an experience. One time, this is maybe 10 years ago, a guy I know who was very unhealthy. He had not a heart attack, thank God, but he had an incident and he went to the hospital. It happened to be on Tisha B'Av. And his doctor happened to be a frum guy. And his doctor told him, I mean, this is what he told him straight up. He said, you're going to die. You're going to die. Unless you lose 200 pounds, you are going to die. And the guy did it. He lost all that weight. He was very, very, very heavy. And he lost enormous amounts of weight. Now, had the doctor said to him, you know, you really need to take better care of yourself, and you really need to watch what you eat, and he would have lost 50 pounds. People said, wow, you look great. He needed to lose a lot more weight. And had the doctor sort of sugarcoated it, pardon the pun, it wouldn't have been effective. He had to say to him, you are ugly. I hate this. And then you'll do something about it. As long as it's kind of sort of not so bad, it's kind of sort of okay and tolerable, you'll do something about it. But it's not. So he shocked him with, and not by being dramatic, by telling him what he understood to be the medical truth. He wasn't just being mean. It's not about glee. It's not about gloating. It's about giving him the straight up story so that the person can understand the severity of the circumstance. So when we say it's a mitzvah to love him and it's a mitzvah to hate him, the hating is a form of love. I know it sounds bizarre, but if the hating is saying to the person, you need to shake this up. This needs to change, not just get a little better. This is radical. You know, it was leaving Mitzrayim. If you remember, the Yidden never asked to leave Mitzrayim. That was unimaginable. They just asked for the slavery not to be so bad. But it needed to get to the point where there was no choice that they had to leave. So the mitzvah to hate, again, it can't come from gloating. You know, again, I'm not here to discuss child psychology, but when a parent has to rebuke a child, you shouldn't do it for their, I'm stressed out, so I yell at my child. It's for them. That's why it's prohibited to be angry, but it is permitted to display anger. Hashem flares his nostrils. He displays anger. Anger is something that overtakes me. Displaying anger is a mechanism to evoke proper behavior. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe says here, "V'shteihem hein emes." They are both emes, the love and the hatred. I lost my place. I hate the evil. And I love their imprisoned and hidden godly soul. Remember, the core essence of Tanya is that opening line of chapter 2 that says that a Jew has a second soul, which is an actual part of Hashem. And therefore, everything about us is to utilize that aspect and not our human animal aspect. Again, to elevate the spiritual over the human. And this is true about me, and it's true about him. So what I hate is his animalistic behavior. And again, when we say animalistic, we don't mean that innately as an insult. Animals don't talk back to their mother. Animals don't commit crimes. But I hate that the way his animal soul has taken charge of him. So he has engaged his intellect to devise evil. And I love what I am longing for is deep buried within him, that absolute certainty of his nefesh elokis. So there is a godly side and there is a impulsive side. The impulsive side is what I despise, and the godly side is what I love. Yaakov and Esav, the two forces that exist within us. And it's true about myself. We talked about in the last chapter about being annoyed with my humanity, being annoyed with the constant gnawing of I want, and I'm tired, and I'm hungry, and me, and give, and this, and I, and so on. And it becomes annoying. Why am I always doing that? Why does my elbow always hurt? Why aren't my fingers dexterous enough, et cetera, et cetera? And also, to simply have rachmanis on him, to have rachmanis on the person. So it's good for me because I have the mitzvah of loving my neighbor, even if he doesn't change. And that's why we got to be so careful about telling people, everyone just needs someone to love them. So if they fail, that's because I didn't love them. It's like blaming. If you were a good teacher, they wouldn't be bad because they just need someone to love them. So that means no, it doesn't mean that. They do need someone to love them. Your loving them may not, in fact, change them, but you should still love them. Even if that loving means you have to expel him, but then you should make sure to go home and say Tehillim for this poor child who is so distraught that he's in this difficult circumstance. And then to have rachmanis on the person, to daven for them. And we have story after story of people who we daven for. This guy, you're going to daven for that guy? You know how evil he is, right? That's what we're davening for, because his soul is trapped. We're davening for his poor neshama that's trapped inside this person. Because the Yetzer Toiv, the godly soul, the Nefesh Elokis, I should say, is trapped in this person. His evil has so imprisoned it. So I'm davening for his godly soul, even if the person, as he presents himself, is intolerable. But it's simply a rachmanis on his neshama. And we should have rachmanis on that neshama. And we have this idea, and probably we've even experienced it, that when we have rachmanis, it's hard to hate the person. If we are annoyed at the person because we think that they are deliberately acting in this belligerent manner, and then we have pity on them. It's pitiful that this person is in this state. So again, there is a value in avoiding the person for sure. We're not talking about extending myself to personal peril. But what I have rachmanis on is that poor neshama that's trapped inside this guy. He's trapped inside this person. I remember times when I would be in the car with my father, I should live and be well, we would pass somebody and the music is pounding, my father would say, that poor guy, he's trapped in that car with that loud noise. He probably can't figure out how to turn it off. Poor guy. So you have rachmanis. This poor neshama is trapped in this guy. His body's going, and this poor guy. We should teach him how to turn off the radio. He probably doesn't know, because nobody would voluntarily want to be subjected to that noise. And, it is that idea. It's trying to crowd out, again, not to belabor that analogy, but it's trying to crowd out the call of the Nefesh Elokis. The godly soul said, hello, is trying to drain out that character. And this is what it means that Yaakov released Avram, that Yaakov is the quality of compassion. That's, Yaakov succeeded. It's not a competition, but Yaakov succeeded in that all of his children stayed with the program. Unlike his father, who had Esav, who he had to dismiss, and his grandfather, Avram, who had a son, Yishmael, that he had to dismiss. Through Yaakov's compassion, Avram and Yitzchak also were very good people. They were excellent parents and wonderful teachers, and they read all the parenting books. And yet they had a son, Yishmael, and a son, Esav. So it's not like, quote unquote, well, like I said before, they just need someone to love them. So if they turn out to be rotten, it's my fault because I didn't love them? Not necessarily. It's a gullus. But Yaakov, what we can learn is he had the quality of compassion. And he also had all of his children who didn't get along with each other too well. Remember, the nice one only sold his brother into slavery. The other ones wanted to kill him. So they had their own struggles, and they all certainly had a very different way. The 12 tribes represent 12 different perspectives on how to serve Hashem. And yet they all stayed together with the program because Yaakov learned from his father and his grandfather. Like I said, it's not a competition to have both chesed from Avram and gvura from Yitzchak, and then he blended them together to have both. So I can hate the person and love the person concurrently. And now I'll try to put something in brackets. Now, the square brackets are not just a typo or a choice of the printer. it suggests that this is like a note. You could sort of skip it, but the Alter Rebbe does circle back to this idea. David HaMelech, who had a pretty kind of rough life, his son tried to kill him. His best friend, or his closest advisor, I should say, Achitophel, sided with his son to plot against him. His father-in-law, talking about in-law jokes, literally tried to kill him. Shaul HaMelech literally threw a spear at him. He spent his life on the run. He had to go to the Philistines. I mean, he had a rough life. And he had sort of what we would call today the prerogative to be hateful, but he wasn't. But he says, with the absolute hatred, I hate them. So there does seem to be some, again, aspirational virtue to some degree to hate. So is there ever a proper time to be hateful? Is there ever hating that is kosher? So the Alter Rebbe explains, this is talking about the minim, we'll talk about that in a moment, and the apikorsim. Now, I just want to finish this and I'll come back. They have no portion in the God of Israel. The Shabbos, as it says in the Gemara. Now, who are the minim and who are the apikorsim? They're similar, but a little bit different. So the apikorsim were followers of Epicurus, who was an apikoros, pardon the pun, meaning he was like chauvinist. There was a guy named Chauvin, and then the people who emulated him were called chauvinists. There was a guy named Epicurus, and then people who emulated him were apikorsim. And he postulated the concept, as we would call today, basically of non-atheism. There's no theist, there's no God, and so on. So these are apikorsim. That is, they deny God. The minim actually called themselves the maminim. The word maminim means the believers. So they were the people who came along. Essentially, they rejected rabbinic interpretation and all the rabbinic laws. And they were Bible literalists. And like the Sadducees, who were followers of Tzadok, and the Baisusim were the followers of Baisus, they called themselves maminim. We're the real believers. We're the real ones. So when we wanted to refer to them, we didn't want to call them maminim because we didn't want to give them a complimentary phrase. So they did a play on the word. They called them minim, which means like species. So it's a little derogatory and it's a little play on the word. The difference between the apikorsim and the minim are the apikorsim deny God entirely. And the minim, they say, we know God better than you. Now, what's happened is they have cut themselves off from the people of Israel. There's an old joke about the man who tells the rabbi that he's an atheist, and the rabbi says, oh, you must be a great Talmud scholar. He says, Rabbi, I'm an atheist, a Bible scholar. The rabbi says, you're not an atheist, you're just ignorant. I mean, you don't even know. So if I say, I don't accept the theory of relativity, well, what do you know about it? Nothing. So am I really rejecting it? Unless I'm truly fluent in it, unless I truly know what it is, I can't really reject it. So we say, maybe because of our bias, that there's no real apikorsim anymore. There are no, because they don't know. They don't know. Now, you can find people who are scholarly. They claim they don't. We say, they don't even mean it themselves. They say they don't believe in God. They say it's only academic. They say that, but they don't even really believe it. So, this is our bias, which is born of our love and our presumption that they do really mean it. But if we could encounter such a person, yeah, maybe in those circumstances, but they're the rarest of the rare circumstances. And it's people who are detrimental. I mean, you talk about, and I'm not talking about only in the times of King David, but, who were the communists? Who arrested the Frierdiker Rebbe? Two Jewish guys. One who was born from a bracha from the fifth Rebbe. And he said to the Rebbe, I want to carry your bag. And he said, I'm not letting you carry my bag. Maybe those guys, it's appropriate to hate. It's a hard thing. But it's not people that we're encountering, your typical sort of American, wholesome Jewish kid who never went to Hebrew school or, God forbid, went to Hebrew school. And therefore he thinks he knows and he hates it. And it was boring. And Abraham smashed the idols and it's so silly and childish. They're not vigilant and violent. I have a picture. I don't think I could show it to you, but it's a beautiful picture. Rabbi Yosef Moskowitz putting on film with this guy, and the guy's license plate reads atheist. He's a guy, he lives somewhere in Deerfield. Of course, he's a Jewish guy. And he's always suing everybody. You may have heard of him. He runs some organization. He's suing the city of Zion because they're they have a cross on their logo, and he's suing this guy and that guy, and he doesn't want to use money because it says in God we trust. And he's, of course, a Jewish guy. I wish I could show you that picture. Let's see if I can figure out how to do it. I don't think so. I doubt it. But let me see 1 second here if I can figure it out. I have it as my what do you call that? Like profile picture. Okay, I can't figure it out. I'm sorry. If I can find it, I'll send it in the email. But it's beautiful. He's got tefillin on. Rabbi Yosef Moskowitz has his arm around him, and his license plate, atheist. That's not the guy we're talking about here. All right. Have a super week, everybody. Next week we'll start up with chapter 33. Bye-bye.